Montana Territory, 1879. The fire had already eaten through half the homestead by the time Josephine O'Conner dropped to her knees in the dirt, dress torn, hands shaking, the smell of smoke and blood thick in the air. Her husband's body lay face down near the porch, rifle still clutched in his hand. The children, her babies, were gone. Taken. She had not even had time to scream. The riders had come fast, masked, cruel. They tore through their small ranch like wolves, killing for sport, taking for profit. They left her with nothing but the sound of hooves fading into the hills and the unbearable silence that followed. Josephine stayed there until the fire burned itself out, until the sun dropped behind the ridge and the cold crept in. She did not cry. She could not. Her eyes felt like stone. She buried Thomas the next morning with her bare hands. There was no shovel left, no tools, just scorched earth and burnt timber, and her own 2 hands. She marked the grave with a piece of fence post and sat beside it, staring at the blackened ruins. Then she stood up, and she started walking. The road into town was long, and the sky above was steel gray. She walked for 2 days, barely eating, barely sleeping. Her dress was stiff with soot and dried blood. Her boots were blistered through. Her body ached, but her heart was gone. She reached the edge of Alder Gulch late on the 3rd day. The mining town bustled with noise and grit, but Josephine did not see it. She walked through the muddy street like a ghost. She collapsed outside the livery, and the last thing she saw before blacking out was the silhouette of a man, tall, broad-shouldered, Stetson tipped back, stepping out of the stable. When she woke, she was warm. Blankets, fire, the scent of leather and hay. "Easy," a deep voice said nearby. "You are safe now." She blinked, turned her head. The man sat in a wooden chair by the hearth, arms resting on his thighs, watching her with steady eyes the color of wheat. "My name's August Shepard," he said. "You passed out outside my barn. Figured you could use a place to rest." Her voice came out rough. "Josephine." He nodded once. "You hungry?" She nodded, just barely. He brought her a bowl of stew. She ate slowly, the warmth hitting her chest like a hammer. She had not had real food in days. August did not push her for answers. He did not ask what happened. He just handed her water, then another blanket. That night she did not sleep much. Her body twitched with every creak of the floorboards. Her ears strained for the sound of horses. But nothing came. Just the soft crackle of fire and the slow rhythm of August's breathing from the other room. She stayed 2 days. August never asked her to leave. On the 3rd morning, she sat at the kitchen table, fingers around a chipped mug, eyes hollow. "They took them," she whispered. August looked up from the stove. "Who?" "My children, my son and daughter. They took them, after they shot my husband and burned my home." He went still. "How old?" he asked quietly. 8 and 6. Matthew and Mary. She ran her hand through her tangled hair. "I do not know who they were. Outlaws, maybe. There were 5 of them, maybe 6, all with red scarves over their faces." August set the coffee pot down slow. "I know a man," he said. "Marshal east of here, out in Virginia City. He keeps records, tracks men like that." Josephine looked up. "Why would you help me?" He met her eyes. "Because no one should have to bury their husband with their hands." They left the next morning. August saddled 2 horses and packed provisions. Josephine wore one of his old coats, too large, sleeves rolled because she had nothing else. They rode in silence most of the way. She was stiff in the saddle. He noticed, kept the pace easy. At night, they camped beneath the stars. August cooked. Josephine cleaned up after. They did not speak much, but something passed between them, quiet understanding. A shared space that held no demands. By the time they reached Virginia City, Josephine's hands had stopped shaking. Marshal Beckett listened as August told him what happened. Josephine sat beside him, eyes on the floor. Beckett rubbed his jaw. Red scarves, you said. Could be the Moro gang. Been raiding homesteads. Stealing kids to sell off to work camps down near Cheyenne. Josephine's stomach turned. Then we have to go. Beckett shook his head. You go near Cheyenne alone, you will not come back. You need someone who knows those hills. August stood. Then I will take her. Josephine looked at him, startled. August, I said I would help, he said simply. They rode out the next morning. It was harder now, colder, the trail rougher, but Josephine did not falter. Every mile brought her closer to Matthew and Mary. Every mile gave her something to hold on to. They reached the edge of the foothills 5 days later. August knew the land, knew how to move quiet. They came upon a camp at dusk, 6 men around a fire, 2 children tied to a wagon wheel. Josephine's breath caught. She would know those faces anywhere. She turned to August. That is them. He studied the camp. Stay here. No, his brows pulled together. I am not waiting back like some helpless thing. Those are my babies. August hesitated, then nodded. All right, stay behind me. They moved through the trees like shadows. August fired first one shot, clean. The camp exploded in chaos. Josephine ran for the children. Matthew saw her first and screamed, Mama! She cut the ropes with shaking hands, pulled them into her arms. Mary sobbed into her shoulder. Gunfire snapped through the trees. August took down 3 more. The last one ran. Josephine did not care. Her children were alive. They were here. August came back, rifle slung, blood on his sleeve. You are all right? She nodded, tears streaking her face. You brought me back my children. He looked at her, something deep in his eyes. You brought yourself. They camped there one more night. Josephine held her children close, and when they slept, she sat beside August at the fire. I do not know how to thank you, she said. You do not have to. She looked at him, really looked. The rough jaw, the kind eyes, the quiet strength. I want to, she whispered. August reached for her hand. She let him. The ride back took longer. The horses were loaded heavier now, and the cold came down harder each night. Josephine wrapped Mary in her own shawl, tucked Matthew against her side when the wind picked up. August didn't say much, but he rode close, always a few paces ahead, always glancing back. They came upon a frozen creek 2 days south of the hills. August dismounted first, breaking ice for water while Josephine helped the children down. The girl whimpered from the cold. Josephine rubbed her arms. She hasn't eaten since morning, she said. August pulled a satchel from his saddlebag and handed her a wrapped biscuit. That's the last of the dry bread. We'll need to trap something tonight. Josephine nodded, then crouched near her daughter, breaking the biscuit into smaller pieces. Matthew stood beside them, silent, eyes scanning the trees. August watched the boy. He's sharp. He had to grow up too fast, she said. Most boys out here do. That night, they pitched camp near a bluff, flanked by stone on one side and pine on the other. August set a snare before dusk and came back with a rabbit near dark. Josephine cleaned it while he built the fire. The children curled together under August's wool blanket. Josephine watched them sleep, then looked over at him. You were a father once? August didn't answer right away. He stirred the stew, jaw tight. No. Wanted to be. She didn't press, but the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of things neither one could say yet. By the time they reached Alder Gulch again, Josephine's boots were falling apart. The hem of her dress had frayed near the ankles. August led them through the back of town, past the smithy and the shuttered mercantile, toward the stable. A dog barked once, then quieted when August lifted his hand. He helped the children down, then looked at Josephine. "You can stay here if you want." She studied his face. "And if I wanted more than just a place to sleep?" He didn't look away. "Then we'd talk about what comes next." They didn't speak of it again that day. Josephine spent the evening washing the children with heated rainwater from a barrel behind the stable. August repaired their shoes with scrap leather. When the children were asleep in the hayloft, Josephine stepped outside. The moon was high and cold above the mountains. She found August near the fence, mending a broken post with thick twine. "I never thought I'd see them again," she said. "You brought them back. I didn't do it alone." He tied off the final knot, then turned to her. "I'm not planning on going anywhere." She didn't say anything for a while. Her eyes followed the line of the ridge beyond the town. "I used to think happiness was something you had to earn," she said, "like a debt. But maybe it's quieter than that. Maybe it's just someone staying when they don't have to." August took a step forward. "I don't want to be anywhere else." Their hands met between them, rough and calloused, warm from work. Josephine closed her fingers around his. They married in early spring. The preacher was a soft-spoken man with a limp, and the chapel was barely more than a single room with a cross nailed to the back wall. Mary carried a sprig of sagebrush tied with twine. Matthew stood beside August, taller now, face solemn. Josephine wore a second-hand dress and a ribbon August had given her. She took his name without hesitation. Later that summer, August built a new cabin with his own hands. Not far from where the creek ran fuller, surrounded by cottonwoods. He built 2 rooms, not one a space for the children and one for them. Josephine planted beans and onions beside the door. The walls smelled of pine and sawdust and hope. That autumn, she told him she was with child. He sat very still when she told him. Then he stood and pressed both hands to her waist, his forehead to hers. "I didn't know I could want something this much," he said. She smiled then, soft and sure. "You gave me back a life. This is part of it." When the snow came, it came soft and early, blanketing the cabin in silence. August chopped wood each morning, and Josephine sat by the hearth, sewing small shirts beside Mary, who asked if the baby would sleep in her cot. Matthew helped August string traps and mend the fence. His eyes had lost their fear. He asked questions now, and August answered everyone. One night, when the wind howled against the windows, Josephine stood at the door and watched the sky. August joined her, setting his hand on the small of her back. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked. "I think about tomorrow, and after that, the day after." She leaned into him. "I used to be afraid of the future. What about now?" She turned her face toward his. "Now I'm just afraid I'll wake up and find it gone." "You won't," he said, and she didn't, because the days came, and they came with warmth and rhythm, with the sound of boots on wood and laughter from the children's room, with meals shared around a table August had carved himself, with kisses that started slow and ended in sleep. They took everything from her once, but August gave it back quietly, piece by piece, until there was nothing missing anymore. By the time the baby came, the cabin had settled into a rhythm that felt older than the year. The wind shifted through the cottonwoods like breath, and the snow stayed packed in the shady corners past the equinox. Spring had thawed the creek, but the cold hadn't quite let go. August left early that morning to check fence lines farther north, taking Matthew with him. The boy had grown taller through winter, his shoulders beginning to square out beneath the hand-me-down coat August patched with suede. Mary stayed close to the hearth, stitching a cloth rabbit with clumsy fingers and quiet focus. Josephine's hands trembled when she poured water into the basin, though she said nothing aloud. The ache had started before dawn and hadn't let up since. By mid-afternoon, she knew it was time. She sent Mary to fetch Mrs. Finley, the widow who lived 2 miles down the ridge and had midwifed nearly every birth in the valley for the last 15 winters. Josephine waited, pacing slow, bracing her hands against the table each time the pain surged. She didn't cry out. She didn't call for help. She had brought 2 children into the world already, but this felt different. This was the child born of a second life, not the first. Mrs. Finley arrived in a rush of shawls and snow-dusted boots, cheeks pink and eyes sharp. She barked orders with the ease of someone who knew when to speak and when to let silence settle. Mary heated more water without being told. Josephine gritted her teeth and leaned into the pain. The sun was low when August returned. His boots hit the porch heavy, the door swinging open with a gust of cold. "Where is she?" he asked, not waiting for an answer before crossing to the back room. Mrs. Finley met him at the doorframe, one hand raised to stop him. "She's strong, but she's near the end of it. Stay out until I call." He nodded once, jaw tight. Matthew hovered behind him, eyes wide, unsure whether to be scared or proud. Hours passed. The sky darkened. Mary dozed beside the stove, curled into the old quilt Josephine used to carry in her pack when she had nothing else. Then, just before midnight, a cry broke the hush. August stood before Mrs. Finley finished calling him, stepping inside with his hat still in hand. Josephine lay back against the pillows, hair damp against her temples, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. In her arms, a tiny girl blinked beneath a swaddle of linen and wool. Her skin was dusky from the firelight, her mouth shaped like August's. He crossed the room slowly, as if the floor might vanish beneath his boots. When he reached the bed, Josephine looked up at him, voice hoarse but steady. "She's here." He lowered himself beside her, one hand brushing her wrist before settling over the baby's back. She was quiet now, breathing deep, her fingers curled against Josephine's collarbone. "What's her name?" he asked. Josephine didn't answer immediately. She looked down at the child, then back to him. Her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "Clara." He nodded once like he was sealing something. "Clara Shepard," he said. Josephine closed her eyes, tears slipping past her lashes without sound. Mrs. Finley made her exit just before dawn, leaving behind tinctures and instructions and a sharp warning that Josephine wasn't to lift anything heavier than a kettle for at least a week. August walked her to the edge of the trees, gave her a wrapped bundle of venison for the journey back. In the days that followed, the cabin changed in the quietest ways. Matthew chopped wood without being asked. Mary learned to boil cloth and fold it just right for swaddling. Josephine spent more hours in bed than she liked, but each time she stirred, Clara was never far, either curled on her chest or nestled in the cradle August had carved from pine and lined with rabbit fur. One evening, as the light faded to gold, August stood near the window, turning a small wooden piece in his hands. Josephine watched him from the rocker, the baby asleep against her shoulder. "What are you doing?" she asked. He held up the carving. A horse, its legs still rough, but the shape already strong. "For Clara. Thought I'd make her a few toys before she's old enough to know she wants them." Josephine smiled, the kind that started in her chest and worked its way up slow. "Did you ever think your life would look like this?" He set the carving down and walked to her, crouching so they were eye to eye. "No. But I prayed for something close." Josephine reached out and touched his cheek, fingers tracing the edge of his jaw. "I used to think survival was enough, that waking up and not feeling pain was all I could ask for. But now," he leaned into her hand, "now, I want it all. The hard winters, the warm springs, the weight of you beside me every night we get." He kissed her then, not rushed, not hungry, just steady, like he was anchoring himself to something he trusted would never leave. When Clara stirred, they both looked down. Her eyes were open now, dark and curious, taking in a world she'd only just begun to know. Josephine kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "You came from ashes, little one, but you were born into a home." She looked to August, and he nodded once, as if to say we all were. The first real thaw came late that year, creeping down from the ridge in slow drips and softened earth. By early April, the snow along the creek had turned to slush, and the path to the barn held deep ruts from daily use. Josephine walked it anyway, careful of her footing, Clara bundled snug across her chest in the sling August had stitched from a length of old muslin. Her body still ached in small ways, but she welcomed the movement, the quiet work of returning to herself. Inside the barn, August was elbow-deep in the flank of their aging milk cow, coaxing her to stand. She had slipped in the frost a few days past and hadn't favored her right leg since. Josephine stopped just inside the door, waiting until he looked up. "She's still not steady." He straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. "No. But she's eating. That's something." Clara stirred, her breath warm against Josephine's collarbone. "I was thinking," Josephine said, stepping closer. "Once the ground's firm, we could start clearing that patch east of the cabin. The soil's darker there. Might hold better for corn." August nodded, brow furrowed in thought. "We'll need to fence it. Something low, just enough to keep the mule from wandering in." Josephine adjusted the sling, shifting Clara's weight higher. "Matthew can help dig post holes. He's strong enough now." "He's been waiting to be asked." Josephine smiled faintly. "He's like you that way." August didn't reply, but something in his expression softened. Later that evening, after the children were settled and the fire burned low, Josephine sat at the table with her sewing basket open, patching a tear in Mary's sleeve. August came in from the lean-to, shaking the chill from his shoulders. "I passed old man Duffy on the ridge," he said, hanging his coat. "He's heading to Bozeman in a week. Said he could take a list if we need supplies." Josephine didn't look up from her stitching. "We could use more flour, and I'm low on thread. Maybe some paper and ink for Matthew. He's been trying to write out his letters." August set his hat on the peg. "I'll get it to him tomorrow." She paused, needle hovering. "Could you ask if he'd bring back beeswax too? I've been thinking of making candles before the tallow starts to turn." August crossed the room and drew out the chair beside her. Clara's cradle sat near the hearth, her tiny breath even and slow beneath the quilt. Josephine glanced at her, then back to him. "You always sit like that when something's on your mind." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I saw tracks near the edge of the north field. Wagon ruts, fresh. Too wide for Duffy." Josephine's hands stilled. "Think they came close?" "Not close enough to see the cabin. But they were watching something." She set the mending down carefully. "Do you think they were looking for us?" "I don't know, but I'm going to take a ride out that way tomorrow, just to be sure." "I don't want you going alone." August looked at her, quiet for a moment. "I never do anything alone anymore." She reached for his hand, folding her fingers over his. "Just be careful." "I will." The next morning, after he'd saddled up and ridden north, Josephine kept the children close. Matthew helped her gather dry kindling from the shed, and Mary took to Clara with a quiet attentiveness that surprised her. The girl didn't fuss, only whispered songs her mother used to sing, her small hands brushing the baby's cheeks with care. By dusk, Josephine had paced the cabin 3 times. When hoofbeats finally came from the trees, she stepped out onto the porch before the horse cleared the bend. August dismounted slow, his coat damp with mist. He tied the reins off, then looked up at her. "Just trappers," he said, "passing through, looking to sell pelts east." Relief dropped through her like a stone. "You sure?" They had no reason to lie, just hungry for coin. She met him at the edge of the porch, her fingers brushing his. "I waited all day with a rifle near the window," she said. "Just in case." "I know." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded scrap of paper, worn at the edges. One of them had this. Said he found it nailed to a post up near Virginia City. Josephine took it, unfolding it carefully. The ink was smudged from damp, but the name was clear. Morrow. Her jaw tightened. "He's still alive." "Maybe, but he's far east now. That trail's cold." She looked up at him. "If he ever comes near us again." "He won't." August's voice carried no edge, only certainty. She nodded once, then stepped back inside, leaving the door open behind her. That night, they lay close beneath the quilt, Clara in her cradle nearby. The wind had shifted again, warmer now, whispering through the chinks in the walls. Josephine turned to him in the dark. "Do you think we'll ever be done looking back?" No, his hand found hers beneath the blanket. "But we're not walking backward anymore." She closed her eyes, letting the quiet settle. Tomorrow would bring planting, and fence posts, and a trip south for beeswax and thread. The world wasn't safe, but it was theirs. She had been taken once. But now nothing could steal this. The first calf was born on a morning soft with low fog and birdsong. Mary, still in her nightgown, shouted from the barn before the sun had lifted clear of the ridge. August was already halfway into his boots when Josephine met him at the door. Clara balanced on her hip. "Mary says it's standing," she called as he reached for his coat. "That's a good sign." He nodded, pulling the collar up against the damp. "I'll stay out till it nurses." Josephine kissed Clara's forehead and smiled faintly. "We'll bring warm bread down when it's ready." The cabin had settled into its spring rhythm, early light, mending by the window, Clara's soft sounds as she started to notice the world around her. The children had grown stronger through the winter, and the land had begun to answer back to their efforts with green shoots and loamy soil. The days moved not quickly, but with purpose. That afternoon, they sat under the cottonwood behind the cabin. Clara slept in her cradle basket beside them, and Mary gathered wild violets at the tree line. Josephine leaned back against the trunk, her eyes on August as he whittled a spoon from a piece of birch. "Are you still thinking about building that smokehouse?" she asked, watching the curls of wood fall to the grass. He nodded, not pausing in his work. "Before summer's end. I've got the stones stacked already. Just need to finish the roof frame." She reached down and brushed a bit of sawdust from his knee. "You never stop. There's always something that needs doing. And if, just once, you didn't do it?" He looked up then, and the corner of his mouth lifted not a grin, but something easy, content. "Then I'd sit right here with you." She shifted closer, resting her head against his shoulder. "It's good here. I didn't know a place could feel like this." He set the spoon aside, letting it fall into the grass. "It's not the place, Joe." She turned toward him, her breath catching just slightly at the softness in his voice. "It's you. It's the way you look at the land, the way you hold our girl like the whole world's in your arms. It's the way the children trust you without needing to ask why. You made this into more than a cabin and dirt. You made it home." She didn't answer, not right away, just leaned up and kissed him slow, her fingers curling into the collar of his shirt. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. "I love you, August Shepard." He kissed her again, slower still. "I know." That summer, they harvested early lettuce and wild onions, and Clara began to reach for things with both hands, her grip tight and curious. Matthew learned to follow tracks through the woods and brought back news of a badger den near the far ridge. Mary took to keeping a small journal, filling pages with pressed leaves and sketches of birds she saw near the creek. In mid-June, August finished the smokehouse, and Josephine surprised him with a cured hem she'd bartered for with the Finleys. They shared it with neighbors who came down from the hills, bringing jars of honey and tins of dried apples in return. One evening, after the dishes were done and the children had gone quiet, August pulled a small box from his coat pocket. He handed it to Josephine without a word. Inside lay a brooch silver, oval-shaped, with a pressed sprig of sage set beneath glass. "I found the silver in the streambed last fall," he said. "Had it made in town. Thought maybe." She ran her fingers over the smooth edge. "It's the same shape as the one I lost. I remember." She looked up at him, eyes full. "You remembered something I never said aloud. I remember everything about you." She pinned it to her bodice, fingers trembling slightly. "You've given me more than I knew how to want." He touched her cheek. "And you gave me a life." The following year brought good rains and a second child, a boy, born in October as the frost set in. They named him Samuel after August's grandfather. His hair came in dark, his cry strong and insistent. Clara took to him fiercely, stubbornly protective, already a shadow at his side. There were hardships, yes, a coyote in the henhouse one spring, a fever that passed through the valley the next, but nothing that broke them, nothing that unsettled the steady foundation they'd built from ash and grief and stubborn, hard-won trust. Josephine taught Mary to read by lamplight and showed Clara how to knead bread when her hands were big enough to press the dough. August carved a cradle for Samuel and built a new porch that wrapped around the north side of the cabin, where the morning sun hit full. On the first morning of their 5th year together, Josephine stood at the fence line, watching mist rise from the field while August saddled the mule. She leaned on the gate, arms crossed, her shawl pulled tight across her shoulders. "You think we'll still be here when the children are grown?" she asked. He looked up from the straps. "Where else would we be?" She smiled. "I just wonder what this land will look like when they walk it with their own children." He rested a hand on her waist. "However it looks, we'll be watching. Right here." She turned to him, touched his face with the same reverence she had when she first let herself love again. They stood like that for a while, the sun slow to rise, the day not yet begun, wrapped in the quiet legacy of everything they had endured and everything they had built. And the gate creaked gently beside them, not from wind, but from time moving forward.